Hi everyone, it is Lauren from Special Olympics Maine, and today to continue with our Conditioning Back to Sports program this summer, we are going to start for the next 2 weeks our program overview and to share a few more skills and drills with you guys pertaining to the sport of bocce. So, in the last few weeks, we were able to work with a few of our bocce clinicians, one being Scott Gregory, and two of our wonderful athletes from the Navigators to demonstrate a few skills and drills and give you a better outlook on what our bocce program looks like. So before we jump into a few of our skills and drills, this presentation will give you a better understanding of what our program is and the specific rules of bocce that Special Olympics Maine adopts. So we will jump right into what our bocce tournament structure looks like. And what that has looked like in the past and for many years is that our state bocce tournament has taken place at our state summer games up at Orono at the University of Maine. So with that, typically what we have is our traditional and unified teams. So traditional meaning only Special Olympics Maine athletes, and unified teams meaning two Special Olympics Maine athletes and two unified partners. To give you a better idea as well, when registering for the state tournament, we ask for qualifying scores for divisioning purposes. So what that means is that if we have a lower level team, we want to make sure that they are positioned in the same category or division as teams like them, as compared to maybe a little bit of a higher level team. So we do ask for qualifying scores, and throughout this presentation, towards the end, we will go over how to get a qualifying score in order to participate in our event. So with that, we also look into when divisioning, we look at the age group. So again, if you have a team of four, whether that be with all four Special Olympic Maine athletes, or maybe you have a unified team, we always look at and determine the oldest team member, and that is where that team will be placed in the age group. So again, that is determined by the oldest team member on that team. So that is a little quick overview of our tournament structure. Again, this takes place typically at our state summer games in June. We are looking into some other options to be able to offer this as a one-day event as this sport continues to grow here in Maine. And as you may know, continues to grow within our unified structure in high school. So we're looking forward to hopefully expanding this sport. To jump into our General Bocce Rules, again, this is for General Bocce, not necessarily Special Olympics Maine, but we do follow these guidelines as well, and we'll get into more of our specific rules and regulations. But again, if you were going out and practicing, training, or maybe hanging out with your family and playing a game of bocce, these are some rules that you could or should follow when playing. So I will walk these through, you guys. This is for 2 slides coming up. So again, General Bocce Rules. So each team will consist of 4 members or 4 players. And with that, each player will throw 1 ball per frame. So 1 ball per frame. And remember, there's 4 players on 1 team. With this, there's no specific order that the player must be followed or for you to be able to throw that ball. So it can change from frame to frame. So no specific order from each player to throw. With that as well, so I have asked, did you throw the Polina? So if that means the person who throws the Polina, right? So the Polina actually is that white ball in that picture you're seeing in front of you. That is the Polina, and if you throw the Polina, you must throw the first bocce ball. So that is the ball that is on your screen in the red or the green. So that is the bocce ball. So again, if you throw the Polina, you must throw the first bocce ball. A team or maybe a team captain can determine or assign one player as their designated Polina thrower. So that means that you could be the same person each frame to throw that Polina, or you can change it up. all throws after this, all throws are to be made underhand. So that includes the polina and that includes the bocce ball. All throws are to be thrown underhand. So the definition of an underhand throw is to the release point, which must be below the belt line or waistline. So again, that throw, when you release that ball, that hand should not be above that waistline. So it shouldn't be near your shoulder or upwards towards your head. So you should release it below your waistline or below your belt line. That is what determines an underhand throw. With that as well, we'll jump into the referencing of fouls if there is maybe an above hand throw or an overhand throw, and what that might constitute as a foul. What that is looking like too is that all of these throws must be made within the throwing box. So when you get to a state or area level competition for bocce, there will be a designated area on your court or in your court for a throwing box. That is where the balls should be released from. So all throws must be made within the throwing box, and no part of the body, including any wheelchairs or canes or walkers or anything that might be an assisted device that you have, may cross the foul line during a throw. So you want to make sure that you are within that throwing box and you are not stepping over that line when you're releasing that bocce ball. With that as well, one athlete may be in the throwing box at a time. So we want to make sure that one athlete is in that throwing box. Once the athlete has made his or her throw, the athlete will exit the throwing box before the next athlete enters. We want to make sure that everyone is safe in that throwing box. Those balls can be a little bit heavy and definitely hurt if you drop it on your foot or anywhere on someone else. We want to make sure that one athlete is in that throwing box at a time. The exception to this, of course, is that if an individual or an athlete or a coach or a unified partner is in a wheelchair and needs to stay in the court for accessibility reasons, that is okay. So for that exception point that you see on the screen there, if that individual or athlete needs to be in that throwing box because himself or herself cannot move out or in of that box at an easy pace, then we want to make sure that they are staying safe in there and that next partner or athlete is a good enough distance away from them when they are throwing. So it is okay if an athlete or unified partner that is in a wheelchair stays in that throwing box while another teammate is throwing. We want to make sure that no interference happens during that time. With that as well, prior to the start of that game, whether it's a coach or a captain on that team, makes the decision to start at the center of the throwing box. And what this means is that to start the beginning of the game, there is a coin toss. And the team that wins the coin toss will throw the polina in the initial or the first bocce ball to start the game. So again, a coin toss will start the game. If you win, you will take the polina, throw the polina, and that team will also throw the first bocce ball. So every game starts with a coin toss. We'll move on to the next slide. I want to make sure before we move on that you do take note that on your screen you'll see 2 red bocce balls and 1 green bocce ball. In the middle of the red bocce ball and in between the red and the green one, you'll see that the white polina is in the middle. That is called the polina. Our next kind of bout of General Bocce Rules is answering a few more questions. So, what if the polina is not in play? So the team that is in control of the polina has 3 chances to get the polina in play. So if all 3 chances fail and that the polina is thrown out of the court for some reason, for those 3 chances, the opposing team has 1 chance to put the polina into play, meaning inside the court. If that chance is also unsuccessful, if the opposing team does not get the polina into play, that means that the official will also place the Polina at the center point of the midline. So if both teams, if Team A and Team B do not get the Polina after those chances into the court area, the referee or the official will then take the Polina and center it in the middle of the court. They'll place it at the midline. In all cases, the team that once had the control of the Polina, that maybe won that coin toss, will then throw the first bocce ball. To answer, after the initial throw, after the first ball is thrown, then what happens? So following that first initial throw, the opposing team throws their bocce balls until one of their color balls is closer to the Polina than the original throw, or their team has exhausted all 4 balls or thrown all 4 balls. So once an opposing ball is closer or the balls are exhausted, the other team throws again. If a ball is tied with the original mark or point ball, the opposing team must continue to throw until they surpass that original ball or exhaust their 4 balls. So that is how a frame is completed or begins. Once all of the 8 color balls, so we saw on the pass screen here, I'll jump right back, that there is a red ball for one team and green ball for the other teams as well. So all 8 balls have been thrown, 4 green and 4 red. The official will make measurements to determine which color of ball is closest to the Polina and how many of that color ball are closer to the Polina than the opposing color. Each ball is closest to the Polina counts as 1 point. Only one team can win points, and a maximum of 4 points can be won per frame. So once that score is tallied, the official will have both teams go to the opposite end of the court to begin the next frame. The team that won the points or the most points of that previous frame has control of the Polina next. Okay, so we look at how many points are scored within that previous frame, and that determines who is to be able to throw that Polina next in the next frame. So we have come across, what if there is a tie that happens within that frame? So to answer that, if both colored balls are tied for closest to the Polina, if there is a tie for the closest balls to the Polina at the end of the frame will be declared over and repeated with no points being awarded. So if there is a tie at the end of the frame, no points will be awarded to those teams. So to jump ahead, and that again was going over a general bocce rules for the game of bocce. And what we want to jump to next is specifically our Special Olympics Maine rules that cover a little bit more details in terms of what we offer at our state level competition. So again, as I've mentioned before, we have traditional and unified teams. So our competitions focus on traditional and unified team events. A team, again, is defined as 4 athletes. Traditional teams consist of 4 Special Olympics Maine athletes, and unified teams consist of 2 Special Olympics Maine athletes and 2 unified partners without an intellectual disability. Unified teams compete against unified teams, and traditional teams compete against traditional teams. Because of our space and time constraints, Special Olympics Maine establishes a specific time for the play and completion of each game. Routinely, this has been a 20-minute time limit per game, but this can be adjusted based on the venue and total available time for the event. Substitutions are allowed. Subs are allowed. Each team may have 1 substitute identified as a replacement. Because we use a qualifying or divisioning system, the substitute needs to have a divisioning score comparable to the average score of the 4 members of the team to avoid creating an unfair advantage. Once a sub has been made, that individual must complete the game as well. So subs are allowed. You just need to make sure that that substitute, whether it's an athlete or a unified partner, has a comparable qualifying score to those that are on the team. Another question is, what if my team shows up late to a competition? So what we have for that is that if at the start for a game arrives and one team is late, the game will start with the team present, throwing its balls and accruing points for that time frame, and any frames until the delayed team arrives. So that team can continue to play. If a frame is in the process, the returning team must wait until the next frame before their chance to play. Teams who are present at the appropriate court and at the appropriate time will not be penalized because of another team's tardiness. So with that being said, is that if a team is late, that other team, so team A is on time, team A can then start their frames. It is not for when a team B or the other team shows up, they will need to wait until that team A finishes their frame until they can start the game as well. I do want to mention that within our four-member teams is that should a team be unable to start a game with 4 members or complete a game with 4 members, that game will be forfeited. So if a team member or an athlete or unified partner does not show up, okay, so they can't start or finish, and that game will be forfeited. So we must make sure that all members of the team are there in order to play. So we have again at the end, what happens if it's a tie at the end of the 20-minute time cap? So what we see here is that at the end of the game, if the score is still tied, there will be a 1-ball sudden death playoff. So the official will place the Polina centered on the middle line. Each team will be given the opportunity to select one member or one athlete from that team to throw the bocce ball as close to the Polina as possible. The team that would have control of the Polina starting the frame throws the first ball, and the closest ball wins the frame. So again, this is sudden death. We want to make sure that the official places the Polina centered on the middle line, and then each team after that will select one member from that team to throw the bocce ball as close to the Polina as possible. So team A has the chance and team B has the chance. So whoever gets that the closest ball to the Polina at that time wins that frame. Another big question that we get in bocce is whether an athlete or unified partner uses an assisted device like a ramp, if he or she is in a wheelchair and they need to use a ramp. So we do allow that, and Special Olympics Maine allows for the use of those ramps by those individuals or athletes who are unable to hold a ball or throw a ball. So Special Olympics Maine does not provide the ramps or assisted devices. We want to make sure that if you need an assisted device, that you come to the competition with a device. So that is, if you need a ramp, you come to the competition with a ramp. Very similar to what 10-pin bowling has or candle pin bowling has that you've seen that has a ramp. You can use something very similar in bocce. So teams, definitely if you come to a state level or area level competition for bocce, should consult with Special Olympics Maine prior to the competition to ensure that the ramp or device does not violate the rules. Ideally, each device should allow the athlete to have some involvement propelling the ball and or directing the ball forward. In no case will the device provide additional assistance in the propulsion of a ball other than moving it through gravity. So we want to make sure that it's just using it to be able to move that ball forward, but that athlete does have the access to be able to direct that ball towards the Polina. Again, athletes using wheelchairs may stay within the throwing box and are making sure that they are traveling and switching ends when the next frame begins. So we do allow athletes in wheelchairs or unified partners in wheelchairs to be in that throwing box at the same time as another teammate is throwing a bocce ball. We want to make sure that the entering and exiting of that throwing area is safe, is not problematic at all. So with that as well, again, we just went over a few of our we'll go back a slide, general bocce rules. We'll then move forward. We just covered a little bit more explanation with our Special Olympics Maine Bocce rules, so specific to Special Olympics Maine. And before we head off for today, we want to make sure that we are diving into what those measurements look like and what that divisioning or qualifying score looks like. So we're going to first tackle measurements. So again, towards the end of a frame, for those closest balls, if there is something that definitely looks like there could be a tie, we want to make sure that those balls are being measured. This is also important for our qualifying process as well. So this is a video, and we had two of our lovely athletes from the Navigators. We have Ryan here, and we have Brian, and we also have our bocce clinician and Special Olympics Maine board member, Scott Gregory, showing us how to measure a ball appropriately. So this screen will move. It is a video. However, you'll hear my voice over that to explain what they are doing. So at first, Scott is placing and Brian is holding on to a measuring tape. And what this is that if you are measuring when you are going through with athletes a qualifying score, you're going to see that they are measuring from the center side of the bocce ball, so that is the red ball in the picture, to the center side of the polina, so that is the little white ball in the picture. So again, they're measuring from the center side of the bocce ball to the center side of the polina. And you should be taking this measurement in meters and centimeters. So we want to make sure that whatever you are measuring, that it is in meters and centimeters. That is helpful. We want to make sure everything is pretty much standardized when we are getting numbers in and qualifying scores in. So again, this is something very similar that happens at our state level bocce tournaments. And also this will be helpful when you are going through the divisioning and finding your qualifying scores. So that is how you take an appropriate measurement. And we will then jump to divisioning and how to obtain a qualifying score. In this segment right here, we have again Scott Gregory, our bocce clinician, and we have Navigators athlete Brian, and they will be demonstrating walking through for us how to division and how to obtain a qualifying score. Again, this is a must do before you go to any state level event. If you have a team of 4 athletes and we are looking to be able to go to our tournament and go as a traditional team, we need to make sure that we get a qualifying score so we can division your team appropriately at the competition. So with that, again, I'm going to let this play. You'll see that this video is a little bit longer, and you'll hear my voice on top of this. You'll see in the video as well, Scott is explaining to Brian how to be able to throw the balls to the polina. And with that, what this looks like is that a coach, so if we say that Scott right here is coaching Brian, is explaining to him that the coach will place the polina, so that white ball, at the 30-foot line. They will then throw, as Brian does here, 8 bocce balls. You want to try, obviously, to get as close as you can to the polina. And when that happens is that he will then continue to throw the rest of the balls. So the 4 red ones on your screen and the 4 green ones. So as he does that, I will explain then that after he finishes to throw those 8 balls, you will take as a coach, you will take the measuring tape and you will again go from, you'll take the 3 closest balls. So whether that be a green ball or a red ball, and we'll see here that Scott actually kicks out the remaining balls that are pretty far away from the polina. So you want to get the 3 closest balls to the polina. And with that, you will then measure the distances of those 3 closest balls. So as Brian finishes up, you'll see that Scott steps in right over the barrier of the court and explains to Brian that he is going to push away those balls that aren't too close to the polina, and that's pretty evident when you're looking at it. So he pushes those away, and he'll also see, and I know that he didn't have a tape measure right in front of him, but what you can see is that the 3 closest balls to the polina is what he will measure. So he's going to throw those 2 balls out, and I'm going to pause it right here to show you guys that he would then measure those 3 balls. So you will do the same thing for this. So you will measure those 3 distances, get 3 distances at that 30-foot line, polina line. You will then add up that total distance. So those total distances from there, you'll get one number. From there, you will switch sides, and for this circumstance, Brian would go to the other end of the bocce court, and Scott would then place the polina at the 40-foot line, and they will continue that. So then Brian would throw out another 8 balls. He will get Scott will choose the 3 closest balls to the polina, measure those distances, add up those distances, and finally they'll switch sides again, and the coach, or Scott here, will throw out the polina and place it on the 50-foot line, and then Brian, the athlete, would throw out finally the 8 next balls, and again we'll try to get 3 of those closest balls to the polina and measure those distances. He will then add up all of those distances within that 50-foot line throw. So at the end of this, you would have 3 numbers, 3 total numbers. The one number from the adding up of the 3 balls at the 30-foot line, the number that you added the 3 balls up at the 40-foot line, and the number, since you added the 3 numbers up at the 50-foot line. So with that, you would then add up those 3 numbers, the total number at the 30, the total number at the 40, and the total number at the 50. When you add all 3 of those numbers up, you will get a total number. So you want to make sure, again, that is specific to that athlete. And we want to make sure, too, that you do this for all athletes on that team. With that, for a team score, you would then add up all total numbers for those 4 athletes for a total team score. So yes, individually you would get a score, but at the end, when all 4 athletes or 2 unified partners and 2 athletes have gone through that, you then add up all 4 of those scores for a total team score. So again, although Scott didn't show in this specific that he used a tape measure, we want to make sure that you are measuring this in meters and centimeters so it's consistent. So the first part is grabbing a tape measure and making sure you have one of those on hand, and then jumping to how to be able to division and obtain that qualifying score. So with that, we will jump to the very beginning where we first started off with a few of our bocce rules, and then specifically Special Olympics Maine Bocce Rules. And with this presentation slideshow, we do have our Special Olympics Maine rules and regulations available on our site to kind of follow along if you are new to bocce. We want to make sure that if you're jumping in with bocce, and specifically here at Special Olympics Maine, that you are familiar with our rules and regulations. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact our state office. And specifically myself, Lauren, I'll be happy to kind of guide you through our bocce program overview, either on the phone or again, walking you through this presentation. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back soon with a few of our fouls and penalty pertaining to bocce, and some pretty awesome drills and skills for your athletes or for you to be able to practice during this time.